This is Elevator People, conversations about taking ideas to the next level on behalf of visionary leaders. I'm your host, PJ Simmons, and I serve as VP of Marketing at Whiteboard, a creative agency serving visionaries seeking to make vision visible. What happens when someone blends the curiosity of a theologian with the imagination of a designer, and then spends over a decade helping hundreds of organizations bring their ideas to life? You get Eric Brown. Eric is the co-founder and chief visionary officer of Whiteboard, a creative agency based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. But more than that, he's a leader who spent his career asking better questions about meaning, about marketing, about what it really means to work on behalf of others. Now, full disclosure, Eric is also my boss and one of my closest friends. So this conversation gets personal, but it's also packed with wisdom about the future of our industry, the posture of agency, and the kind of marketing that doesn't just make noise, but makes a difference. Here's my conversation with Eric Brown. Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining the show. Excited about this combo because you and I have had a bit of banter in preparation for this.
15 years of banter.
15 years of banter. Well, if we're counting college years, maybe tack that up to 20.
Yeah, 20 years of banter.
But that's a good note because I actually think that sets the stage for your career history and projection, specifically around the conversation that we're having today. For those of you who don't know, Eric is the founder of Whiteboard, creative agency out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Not only does Eric simultaneously serve as my boss, but in interesting turn of events, he's also one of my best friends and has been so for quite some time. In your journey, you built a career at the intersection of marketing, agency leadership, values-driven work. For our listeners who may not be familiar with you or your journey, how would you describe the through line of your work and how you got here?
It's an honor to be on this podcast with you, PJ, and super grateful for you setting the table for this. I mean, at the core, the internet moved to my house when I was 8, 9 years old, somewhere in there, and just changed everything. I remember being sort of enamored with the fact that I could go edit a MySpace website and change out the HTML, and you start to create these worlds and tinker in these worlds. And over the last 20 plus years, the internet has continued to evolve into, what we summarize at Whiteboard a lot and talk about a lot is it is probably the most powerful platform that's ever been invented. Not even 100 years ago, to think that you could connect with strangers across the ocean and the world be synced in a way. This is a very new time in human history. So fell in love with just the internet, the power of it. I thought I was going to work for a nonprofit after college. You take this obsession with making things on a computer, and then you fold that to a simultaneous love of reading, and for me, a big influence has been a deep love for theology and conversations. PJ, you've been a part of those conversations for 20 plus years. And I think one of the things that sticks with me that I think about all the time is a theologian named Walter Brueggemann. He wrote these words: our culture is competent to implement almost anything and to imagine almost nothing. Over the course of our career at Whiteboard, that instinct is, how might we imagine a world that may not yet exist? And the way we live that mission and that idea out is coming alongside organizations and really leaders, people who are trying to navigate a ton of complexity in their sector, a ton of complexity on their team, a ton of complexity in the marketplace. And how do you engage the marketplace with clarity and imagination? For me, it was a website. Squarespace coined this phrase around a website makes it real. When we started making websites for our friends and small nonprofit organizations, we sort of saw the light bulb click in a lot of these founders. minds around, oh, this is the idea that I'm trying to express into the world. After 15 years and over 600 clients, two acquisitions of some mentor agencies of ours, um, the two ideas that drive us at Whiteboard is this sort of obsession with how do we make vision visible.
Mhm.
And the only way to change culture is to create it, which is a quote from a mentor named Andy Crouch.
The intersection of imagination and implementation. That work has actually culminated into Learning from the Trenches, a book that you and our mutual friend and your co-founder, Taylor Jones, wrote called
Yep.
Agency, the Antidote to a Culture Obsessed with Self. I'm really excited for our audience to hear a little bit of the visionary genius of some of the conversations that I've had the privilege of being a part of over the last couple of decades, which a lot of it is literally in this book. Agency, the Antidote to a Culture Obsessed with Self. It You talk a lot in this book about purpose, effectiveness, mastery. What led you and Taylor to write it? And even more specifically,
Yep.
how does it connect to the way that you're leading Whiteboard in this world of marketing, meaning, purpose, digital
Yeah.
artifacts, etc.?
No, totally. So agency, we've talked a lot about over the past 15 years, like what is it actually? Madison Avenue in New York City was known for in the 1960s with these flagship agencies that were sort of inventing the advertising industry as we know it. But in our work, it's not just about the work we do, it's also about the posture we hold. We had a mentor who, on one of our calls, he was advising us, like, hey guys, most agencies just tell the story based on their portfolio, it's based on their work. I really want y'all to do some soul searching and ask the question, what does agency really mean to you? I think one of the things we realize is agency is full of tension. It's not a up and to the right, hey, this looks like traditional
Mhm.
capitalism, this looks like scale growth. Agency is the tension we carry. And that tension in its healthiest form will never go away. You have the tension of me and my ambitions. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have others and what are they trying to achieve into the world? And then on a vertical axis, we call this the agency axis. On the vertical axis, you have mission, the bigger idea, the purpose. And then on the bottom is mastery, which is what are the skill sets that I'm bringing to the table? And we just put agency right in the middle. One of the things, as we've talked to a lot of creatives, some agency owners, some business leaders, founders, they identified with those things because every single one of us on any given day, at any given moment, is weighing the fact that I've got to get work done uh, by 5 p.m. so I can pick up my daughter from track practice.
So
Then
that one.
there's, hey, on the mastery side, an article needs to be written or a design needs to be made
Mhm.
or a wireframe needs to be made. And then there's the sort of mission that I'm a part of. And we're holding all these simultaneous things. And sometimes it feels like they're competing against each other. But we found a lot of resonance in the idea of agency as being able to hold those tensions together and moving appropriately and embracing those things. Now, the question mark comes into sometimes they can fold into traps, which I know we'll talk about
Mhm.
later. That was the reason. What does agency mean? How do we define it first for ourselves? Yes, it became a multi-year piece of work to get it on paper.
What I love about the mental model is the humility to confess that it actually is a tension. You have so many ways from season to season, but in this current cultural moment, thought leaders, gurus are communicating these simplified frameworks, silver bullet, hey, here's the answer. And what you have communicated is working on behalf of others as an agent holds within itself personal
Yep.
tension, client tension, meaning tension, purpose driven, that type of stuff, as well as like the performance metrics on not only
Yep.
this is where we're going to get a little bit more detailed into the nomenclature. You and I have been going back and forth, particularly around positioning, and language is very important that we use. And one of the things that has kind of risen to the top for us is this concept of what does it mean to define meaning, to pursue meaning, to understand meaning, and to do so in a way that is, to use the word again, meaningful.
Yeah.
So as we make a transition into wading into the nuance of creative work, marketing work, growth strategy work, in a world where it is just the wild, wild, how should we define meaning in our work?
Yeah. The quote that I always resolve back to, my mom always said growing up, when we were on vacations, we don't remember days, we remember moments. I think that that statement holds a lot of truth when it comes to how we orient our lives. I'm a parent. I've got a 9-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter. Um, our days are full, and and I don't remember the entirety of probably any day that I've ever lived, but I do remember millions of moments.
Mm,
Um, when we think about what occupies our brains and our hearts, I think meaningful work is first and foremost about creating memorable moments. Second, it's about leaning into some of society's most uncomfortable conversations or uncomfortable tensions. What we've tried to do is really, we had a mentor years ago. They were hammering us with a bunch of questions around what do you aspire Whiteboard to be? And we were talking about vision and where we hope to be in 20 years. He just said, Eric, you have a lot of aspirations. Have you written any of these down? He said, well, if you haven't written it down, it exists for anybody else.
mm, mm,
And it doesn't. As leaders, there's so many things that we assume until they're actually pen to paper, you're not going to be able to transfer those intentions and assumptions to reality. The pull for us was, can we create meaningful work that aspires to bring peace that replaces anxiety? So much of the cultural norm or conversation is how anxiety is the headline a lot
yeah,
of times in our personal lives. Curiosity replaces cynicism because obviously in our political sort of dominated culture, it's easy to be cynical. Um, Creativity replaces consumerism. Authenticity replaces vanity. Empathy, intention replaces distraction. Community, generosity replaces greed. Intimacy replaces exploitation. Roundtables replace rants. Unity replaces polarization. Hope, truth replaces lies. Life replaces death. There was this quote, and I forget who to attribute it to, but when a brand forges a link between what it does and what people are seeking out on a very deep human level, that's really where the most meaningful things happen.
mm. Okay, this
Magic
is
sauce, if you will.
yeah, this is magic sauce. This is moving me because obviously you're in this line of work. We work together, but in the marketing realm, which is where I spend a lot of my day in marketing strategy, KPIs, objectives, chasing numbers, focusing on high performing creative, etc., trying to get results for organizations in a meaningful way. However, I have seen in my experience across the landscape a black eye of sorts
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
particular skill sets. How do we ensure that our work actually creates impact, like going beyond the actual numbers?
One of my favorite leaders right now is the co-founder of Collins and Brian Collins.
Yep.
He posted this idea somewhere along the way. The thing we all love, the thing that lights us up, be- becomes just another thing to optimize or
Mm.
streamline or templatize. You see the results everywhere: design, branding, and advertising so invisible, so meaningless. We forget them even while we are looking at them. Creativity, by definition, is useful. Creative people are driven to be useful, to invent, to be different, to make sense of things, to create all kinds of value. And creativity needs space, friction, stillness, wandering conversations without an end goal.
That's brilliant.
And honestly, I don't know if I could sum up that sentiment better.
It is the difficulty that I found within that moves me. What I'm learning about my own journey in this space as a strategist is the process of decoupling the identity of my performance with my love of the craft itself.
Yeah.
It is so difficult to do that. I've become almost entirely convinced that one cannot reach that point
Yep.
until they have crashed and burned in some form or fashion. There's something within us, within our psyches, particularly as marketers, creatives, etc. I can resonate with the idea that my identity can fall in line with the results that it's being driven. Not only as the maker, strategist, marketer, whoever, that invokes and creates anxiety within ourselves. But what is interestingly enough, that posture of anxiety within yourself plays itself into how marketing is experienced and expressed within the broader culture by creating
Hmm.
anxiety in the broader culture,
Yep.
creating artificial urgency, preying on
Yep.
insecurities, distorted reality. We work with a ton of clients. As you, as the visionary leader, and you're having more founder related conversations and got a little bit better pulse on just the digital industry at large, how are you seeing that play out within the
Yep.
industry today? This
Yeah.
marketing and voting anxiety.
I think one thing I'm going to answer sort of two sides of the coin because I think they're important. One's from a client side, and the second is from agency leaders who we've had the privilege of orienting. Marketing will break your heart on the client side, and it will break your heart on the agency side.
Mm,
What we all endured 2020, you know, during the COVID era, I don't think we've all sort of even recovered from or even given ourselves space to reconcile that period of time. On the agency side, you had a big industry squeeze, and a lot of agency peers of ours did not recover. And on the client side too, you saw it in a variety of sectors. I mean, and 2024, I think everybody looked at it with a lot of optimism, and we hear a lot that 2024 was actually rough for a lot of businesses, a lot of leaders, a lot of founders. Um, you have this sort of anxiety that has not gone away in 5 years since 2020. At the same time, you have the innovation in the space, artificial intelligence. We talk about the gurus and the people who, they're like, hey, I've got the formula, follow me. There might be weight and good in the formula, but if there's poor execution on the formula or if it's in the wrong context, there's no silver bullets in
yeah.
our industry, no matter how many times you hear that there are every day. Talking about how do we define marketing at its worst? I mean, marketing becomes hollow. Marketing at its worst detached from vision. It's driven by short-term metrics and focus more on interruption than inspiration. It shifts from being a force for clarity to a generator of noise, flooding the
Mm,
world with messages that lack meaning, depth, and authenticity. When marketing loses its connection to brand vision, it becomes reactive rather than strategic, chasing trends, prioritizing vanity metrics over true engagement, resorting to manipulation instead of building trust. It prioritizes quick wins over lasting impact, sacrificing
mhm,
long term brand equity for momentary attention. Marketing at its worst treats people as targets rather than participants, exploits rather than educates, deceives rather than delivers, and prioritizes volume over value. It saturates digital spaces with empty content, diluting the power of real storytelling and creating a cycle of diminishing returns. And worst of all, bad marketing wastes potential. It allows truly visionary brands to get lost in the noise, their messages buried under gimmicks and generic positioning. It turns what should be a force for meaning and momentum into an exercise chasing attention rather than earning belief. When marketing is untethered from purpose, it stops being an amplifier of vision, becomes just another distraction. But when rooted in authenticity, creativity, and clarity, marketing becomes one of the most powerful forces for shaping culture and inspiring action. And in our words, vision visible.
and that last point is what I believe this next generation of marketers want. There's something deeply burning within us that we have our own vision for a brighter future of what
Yep,
could be, not only within the work that we're doing, but in the value that we're putting within culture. And so, flipping that on its head, how do you think marketing can actually be a force for some of those things?
we're gonna talk about the worst. We got to talk about what's best. Marketing is the bridge between a brand's vision and the world's understanding of it. Marketing has the power to transform your businesses into movements, transactions into relationships, and brands into cultural forces.
And and how do you think we're handling this tension at Whiteboard?
I, I think we as a team have gotten comfortable with relentlessly asking the question, what is true?
Mm,
Because we live and work in such a spin dominated society that truth is the hardest thing to wrestle to the ground.
mm,
I think our team is incredibly open and honest with ourselves and with our clients around the pursuit of truth.
that's good. I'm actually noticing that even in some small instances recently with a few conversations with clients, the easy lever could be to revert back to some tried and true tactics. Yes, they may drive the results, but they may not be the most helpful or redemptive to the end user.
Yep,
You can skirt the truth a little bit in order to get the results, but because it's 90% truth, it's okay. What I've
that's right.
noticed within my own work is that it's forcing me to dig a little deeper, to think with a bit more intentionality that
Yep,
has really strengthened positioning, audience clarification, more creative ways of speaking to said audience, and has really freed me up from attaching the results to the work that I'm doing. I'm finding
yep,
myself having a bit more fun approaching work in
good.
this manner. Sure. Well, so you've spoken about how much marketing is contained within the veneer of agencies. Unpack that a
Yep.
little bit for us.
Yeah. One of our partners, his name is Jason Losi. He founded an agency in, I think, 2001 called Five Stone, New York City based. Jason actually wrote a book with Tim Willard called In probably like 12 years ago. The tagline has always, before Facebook was a public company and before algorithms were as good as they are now, um, he was sort of pushing at this idea of like, how do we live deeply in a surface society? And which, while important,
Yeah.
should not be confused with the true essence and value of marketing. You know, which involves for us like how do we understand an audience? How are we building trust? How are we delivering on promises? Um, and I just think there's this sort of pervasive pressure for immediate results in marketing. Um, I also think there's, we talk about all the formulas and frameworks. There is a seduction of trends in our industry.
Mhm.
And also the scalability illusion, more often than not, if you look at any stock today, and you might see it, you could look within the 12 months, but you look over the span of 20 years.
Yeah.
So I think there has to be more than immediate results. There has to be some honest conversations around the scalability illusion that we see all the time in our social feeds and headlines.
I love the illustration of the veneer approach when marketers pursue growth through various tactics. They put out of the product or service that they're promoting. They find themselves in a continual cycle of having to recycle and redo and re-pursue. And this may be an extremity, but
Yeah.
retrick in a way a new audience
Yeah.
segment in order to get the numbers back
Yep.
into the door. I am newer to the agency world. I've been with Whiteboard now for coming up on 4 years. My experience has been primarily in house over the course of my career.
Yep.
One of the biggest things I've seen within marketing agencies is the culture of burn and churn as I look at the
Yeah.
landscape. This isn't a, hey, let's talk and highlight other agencies' conversations. But I do think that for that to be a common experience, both from agencies and clients with agencies, it to the reasoning behind that. If I had to define it, it's really the difference between chasing perception
Yeah.
versus building something real. How would you define the difference?
Yeah. So much of our work, I mean, we're wrestling with real human tensions and real human issues. And so chasing perception and making impact makes sense. But when you think about it at a personal level of how I'm leading my family, how
Mhm.
how am I being present for my kids, all these tensions, we wrestle with all these things. You have appearance and image versus making impact. We've got to think about substance and real world change.
Mhm.
If you think about a time horizon, you have short term wins and immediate gratification. But if you're going to make impact, like real impact, not a t-shirt design, it's long-term commitment and you're committed to lasting results.
Yep. Yep.
If I'm chasing perception, it's about superficial or opportunistic. If I'm making impact, it's about deep-rooted, authentic alignment with core values. You know, we have a mentor who advised, they were like, hey, Taylor, Eric, your values aren't your values unless they cost you something. And if you're going to lead a company, that cost is not metaphorical, it's literal money. So, what decisions based on your values are going to influence the culture that you aspire to create? If you think about external validation, like chasing perception, seeking validation from others, often through marketing tactics, or am I going to make impact, gaining trust through genuine impact and results? And then you think about sustainability or consistency
Yeah.
is really hard to do. But if I'm thinking about impact, it's a long obedience in the same direction. It's continuous effort to create lasting, meaningful change. And I have to show up for that every day and hopefully compound. James Clear's right. Atomic habits compound themselves if you just show up in small increments every day.
What kind of agency culture are you trying to create at Whiteboard?
Well, it is complex and for a really long time, I think in a good way. How do we align to this idea of being a counterculture for the common good? Which means actively going against prevailing cultural norms with the intention of creating positive change and benefiting the wider community.
Mhm.
Essentially, using a non mainstream approach to promote the well being of everyone involved. It implies challenging societal structures while still aiming to improve the lives of others. And when we talk about the work on the internet and the things we're doing, many of our clients embody really big ideas
Mhm.
that they are living out right now, whether it be pioneering solutions to end homelessness or shaping a, a workforce that's often overlooked or the exploitation of pornography. The clients that we have had the opportunity to serve are asking the question, how am I a counterculture for the common good?
Yeah.
And we're trying to bring that vision to life.
And I think that is a great transition into the conversation. We've talked a lot about meaningful work within the context of internal culture, the art and craft of marketing, of creative
Right.
work. That's only half of what your book agency gets out in the ethos of the conversation.
Right.
So I would like to transition to what you teed up, putting our focus on the client and
Yeah.
the posture of the agency towards the client. Your book, because it's called Agency, emphasizes agency, not just in the business sense, but as a personal
Yep.
posture of ownership, mission, and mastery. How do you define agency as it pertains to its posture towards clients?
Yeah. We are literally building the flags or creating the ideas in a tangible way that our clients are carrying and living out in the world every day. So that's a nonprofit, whether for profit, business, or media, arts and entertainment. I mean, you name it. We've worked across all sectors. Um, every single one of these people are trying to bring something into the world, steward something into the world, or forge something in the world.
Mhm.
And our team orients around how do we serve them to the best of our ability.
And so you've emphasized how marketing should be an act of service towards these people, clients, working on behalf of them. How has that mentality shifted the way that agencies should operate if they want to be
Yeah.
postured with this disposition? The things we've talked about thus far, marketing
Yep.
should be an act of service, right?
Yep.
Working on behalf of others. How does that shift in mentality shift the way that an agency operates?
I think when you're oriented towards others, you have agency at its best. Agency at its best welcomes tension. And more often than not, when there's no tension, there's no agency. And so I think if you're a marketing leader and you feel like you're a widget or a feature or the job has become and the mission, whether pronounced and or under a few layers of of the lead line on your website, if you're just an optimizer, you have to push a reset button. How do you rediscover what agency means for yourself?
So one of the things you've emphasized is that marketing should be an act of service. How does that shift how an agency operates?
I think one of the biggest freedoms for us is when we shift from selling to helping. And so, like, some of our secondary language is oriented around like we help leaders navigate the complex digital landscape with wisdom and imagination. The pressure oftentimes is to sell at whatever cost. Pipelines for most of our agency peers is the thing that's keeping them up at night. For any agent, if you're going to practice agency, shifting from selling to helping is always helpful. For us too, it's relationships. How do we build relationships? Make relationships the most important thing, not the transactions. From an agency, I want my clients to be known. Some of my best memories over the past 15 years were in the impromptu conversations or the dinners. You're just talking life and the struggles around, man, I thought this idea was going to work. I'm having this issue with my family, the things that were unplanned. The other side is the client who probably needs more permission to know their customers because being known, whether you're a customer or a client, is the hardest thing to do. It's the most vulnerable that we can be in this work. I think for us, it's always like value. What value look like? Um, in a world, it's so easy to create volume. It's so
Mhm.
easy to create noise, to
Automate.
generate, automate. There's probably 100 new emails that you and I've gotten since we
Mhm.
started this podcast interview. We feel the effects of volume all the time from a consumer standpoint, from a human standpoint. The value in my life that I feel on a daily basis, it's a handful.
Yeah.
I think the vulnerable pursuit of authenticity, knowing can be sort of a cliche word in our space, but authenticity, when it's so easy to pull the levers of manipulation, and manipulation can look like a lot of things, right? Authenticity is hard. And how do you
Yeah.
position yourself in an authentic way and be authentic? It's a pursuit. I think for us at Whiteboard, given the spectrum of clients we serve, empathy has to be a core practice. When we think about human centered design, but it's got to be a core practice that's done daily and hourly in this work. Yeah, and it takes work and discipline, and there's good days, bad days, but empathy, the core practice is the goal.
Man, what's going through my head right now is I'm picturing an individual who's listening to this episode, and very much like the famous C.S. Lewis quote, you find a friend when you meet them, and the first thing that comes to your mind is, you too? I would say this is the next movement of marketers, strategists, growth oriented people who want to see this come alive. But at the same time, that disposition and that desire is always met with the tension and the pressure to scale bigger
Yep.
clients, stay competitive, drive
Yep.
results. How do we reconcile that?
I mean, for us, it's a continual sort of reacquaintance to the idea that we've got to remain committed to the long term. Similar to the music industry, I mean, there's plenty of artists that have had a one hit wonder. It's incredibly hard to make music a career. This is something Celine Dion actually said at a concert, which my wife loves Celine Dion. If Celine and I were both drowning and Katie could only save one of us, she would save Celine. And I would agree with that decision.
Wouldn't blame her.
And there's plenty of them that
Mhm.
have had and faded out. Long term thinking prevents the illusion that bigger clients will sustain an operating model over the next several decades and beyond. The compounding effect of agency work is made possible by showing up to do the work today. There's also this tension in our space around, are you a maker or are you a manager? Anybody in the agency space has to reconcile that tension. For Taylor and I, fell in love with the work of Whiteboard because we are makers. As we've grown the business and as the team's gotten bigger, there's this pressure to manage. Our first love is still making. Our first love is still doing client work. Hey, what are we going to do next? And how are we going to solve this together? Um, and I would say, like, hey, if you're feeling that pressure and you were a maker and now you're a manager and you hate it, don't give up on what you love to do and orient
Yeah.
back to that, and then, for the man, there are really gifted managers that need to do that, and so, if you love it, keep doing it.
And so, in your particular role, what do you look for in values aligned leader or
Mhm.
organizations before saying yes
Yeah.
to working with
I
you?
think for us, we've really tried to simplify
Mhm.
agents. And I think our greatest wins, the clients that we've served for a decade plus, they believe in our mission and our work as much as we believe in their mission and their work.
Yeah,
That's when the magic happens.
that's true. Yeah.
100%.
So I'm going to skip down just a little bit in our notes as we're coming up on time. And I want to talk a little bit about the future of meaningful marketing. Okay.
Let's go.
Talking about the industry, where it's headed, trends, etc. So, little bit of rapid fire, but where do you see the industry heading? What trends are exciting you? And as we're playing this good cop,
Yeah.
bad cop, what
I
concerns you
mean,
right now?
AI is clearly the wave.
Yeah.
And it's
Yep.
probably the thing that everybody who's listening to this is probably utilizing on a daily basis. Our friends at Praxis Labs in New York City, they wrote an article about their position on AI. One of their ideas that I'll quote is this: one of AI's fundamental capabilities is its ability to operate as a prediction machine that can inform human decisions and choices. But AI's predictive powers are not being deployed in a neutral environment. Many human beings, me, are already limited in their ability to make free and wise choices by unjust markets, inflexible and quasi mechanical systems, entrenched bureaucracies, and repressive regimes. AI could easily be deployed on behalf of these social forces to further suppress genuine human freedom and responsibility. I think for us, we're having conversations daily on the possibility and the implications of AI. Um, it can be a good tool. And I think one of the things that we've ascribed to is always like, is this a tool that I'm utilizing or is it a weapon? Every social platform we participate on can be a tool or a weapon. Where we see the weaponization of these platforms on a daily basis.
So each moment we have the opportunity to choose to be a redemptive agent with
Yep.
the tools that we have at our discretion to utilize.
Yep.
If we want to create a more meaningful, peace centered approach to marketing, what are some practical shifts agencies and brands need to make?
I think we need to reacquaint ourselves with the purpose of design. Brands need to see design as an extension of their point of view, not merely decoration. Decoration, let's make pretty things and let's do creative photo shoots. Those things are important aspects of the brands we support. Your point of view with the world and the work that you do and why you're doing it, never a complete draft that is a manuscript you're always editing. If you're the leader of an organization, being honest about that point of view is a really incredible tool for a team to rally around.
So, Eric, this whole conversation, it really is a worldview,
Yeah.
philosophical way of believing shift for a lot of people. I think a lot of folks, to tie back to that C.S. Lewis quote, feel this within them. They don't know
Yep.
where to start, where to go to cultivate this muscle. Instead of going from A to Z, take the first step, go to A to B. For marketers and founders listening, what's one shift that you would recommend to create marketing that aligns with our values instead of
Yeah.
compromising them?
Probably the best piece of advice that I can give is go back to the beginning of the business. Go back to the beginning of your career with the younger version of yourself. We're thrilled with how you're presenting your ideas to the world. I think so many times the younger versions of ourselves had it right. We were less cynical, maybe even less informed, but more hopeful and more resilient. So get reacquainted with the younger version of yourself. I think
Love,
that's one of the funnest things you can do.
I love that.
As we started Whiteboard when we were 23 years old and had
Yeah.
zero agency experience, if we would have let the naysayers push us away from starting Whiteboard, it might have taken us 10 years to get there. Or maybe we would have gotten jaded and left the idea on the table. But we just felt a conviction and said, let's just try. 15 years
Yeah.
later, we haven't had to resort to a plan B.
For those who are familiar with the context, you're probably picking up a little bit of Eric's theological background of forget not your first love is
Fair.
what he's saying. Yeah. All right. So talk about your first love, younger
Yeah,
years. That kind of ties into a little bit of the personhood of Eric. So I'm going to shoot some rapid fire questions as we wrap our time up, just to kind of,
I'm
hey,
ready.
what are you reading? What's inspiring you right now? All that good stuff. So a book that has deeply shaped your view of marketing. What is it?
Yeah. He's written several books about brand, but the one that I love the most is From Brand Vision to Brand Evaluation by Dr. Leslie Day Turnatoni.
A lesson you wish you learned earlier in your career. This would be an interesting one.
Oh, I'm still learning patience. What you realize is there's a lot of competition. I used to stay up at night thinking about competitors or who would interfere in a plan. What you realize is if you give yourself a little patience, a lot of that noise doesn't last 5 years, doesn't last 10 years, doesn't last 15 years. Give yourself a lot of longevity. A long obedience in the same direction is a differentiator. As a little league baseball coach, there's a challenger brand based in Austin, Texas that I absolutely love called War Stick, founded by a guy named Ben Jenkins. War Stick uh, creates baseball bats, and their most famous baseball bat is called the Bone Saber. The bats themselves are beautifully designed. War Stick's bats are beautiful, but the shared experience that Owen and I have created around War Stick products is just an awesome father son bond. So I'm super grateful for War Stick, a
Cool.
challenger brand in a space that has a lot of century-old brands, the Rawlings and the Louisville Sluggers and the Mizunos.
Yep.
Lots of reasons to not build a brand in the baseball space, but man, their products are beautiful and awesome.
One habit that keeps you grounded as a leader.
This one's a fun one for me. Listening to instrumental music most often is just sort of piano music. For those asking why, because culture tries to spoon feed its thoughts and ideas to us 24/7. And sometimes I think we need clarity, space to face the ideas and thoughts inside of our own heads and hearts. So instrumental music is honestly probably my only life hack.
Love that. Well, last question, my friend. If listeners can take away just one thing from this combo, what do you hope it is?
I think that the best brands aren't just seen, they're understood. And the best marketing isn't just about reach, it's about resonance.
Appreciate your time today. Thank you for making time for
Honored.
me.
Hey, well, thank you for inviting me to the metaphorical Zoom table.
Thank you for listening to Elevator People. It would be an honor if you subscribed on your favorite podcast platform and check out our agency website at whiteboard.is to help you and your team make your vision visible.